like to welcome everybody. Let's get started right now with news you can use. Today, we're going to do a little bit of a deep dive. I've been asked by a couple of clients to explain a little bit more about how inflation works and how all this stuff rolls out. So I put a little chart behind me. Pardon my horrible printing, but the bottom line is, when we get to the bottom line, you're just going to see how this thing works. So we start off at the top of the chart with inflation is too high. We know that that's the case. Everything's expensive. If you just want to get some verification of that, go try and buy gas today versus 3 years ago. $4.50 to, in California, close to $6 for gas. $4.50 in some areas of the country. It was half of that, or 2/3 of that, not that long ago. Groceries are more, eggs, milk, everything is more expensive because inflation got too high. The Fed, in my opinion, got to the party too late, and potentially they're throwing more water on the party than was necessary, and maybe you're going to drown a few of the guests at the party, but we'll see how that goes. So what the Fed does to fight that, the first thing they do is raise the Fed rate. That's the basic rate upon which all financing in the US, that's the cheapest rate possible. It's considered the bank, interbank lending overnight rate. So when we started the year, it was 0.25%. It is today 3.25%. They've stated that by this time next year, it's going to be 4.75%. That has taken mortgage rates from 2.7, 2.8 up to now close to 6%. I'm sorry, close to 7%. We're in the mid to high sixes, 6.45 to 6.75 right now, heading towards 7%. I think by this time next year, if the Fed doesn't change their direction, we could see 8% interest on homes. So they raise the Fed rate, and then what that does, and this is kind of the little hidden thing that people don't pay much attention to, and I've done it just justice. I've talked about, when you raise the Fed rate, our goal is to drop the unemployment rate, but there's a lot of things that happen in between, and that's what we're going to talk about. So when the Fed rate goes up, the strength of the US dollar goes up. Now, the US dollar is the world's reserve currency. It is the basis upon which everybody values their currency, their assets, things like that. So, when people in England, they'll talk about the pounds or maybe the euro, and they'll say, well, what's a euro worth? What's a pound worth? Well, it's worth X number of US dollars. So that's what a reserve currency is. It is the basic underlying sovereign of the world. It is where everybody goes, in case of break the glass type thing, that's where people go to that. So what this has done is it has driven up the value, the worth of the US dollar. It's worth more now than it was even a couple of months ago. And concurrently, it brings down the value of other currencies. So say, for example, right now, you can get a British pound for $1, a euro for $1. Not that long ago, 2-3 years ago, you could get $1.50. It would take $1.50 to buy €1. Now it's 1 for 1. So the value of the dollar has gone up, the value of other currencies gone down. What this in turn does in this country is it drives down our exports, because we're selling expensive things compared to other people's currency. And in fact, as a side to all this, some of the other currencies of the world, especially in developing countries, there's a run on these things. And you think back to, you've seen in the movies that during the Great Depression in this country, the 20s and 30s, 1930s, particularly, there was a run on the bank. You're seeing that happen in some countries of the world right now. There's a run on the government. There's a run on the currencies of some of these countries. There had been a floor below which everybody swore that the Chinese equivalent of dollars, yuan, would never go, and it broke that number, I think Monday or Tuesday this week. It went below 7.2. So the Chinese are terribly worried that there's going to be a run on the currency, that the speculators around the world are going to trade down the value of their currency significantly, wiping out a lot of their assets around the world. And they're making threats and all this, but they're just caught up in plain old economics, and there's not a lot they can do about it, frankly. But this is really hurting other countries a lot more than it's hurting our country. But it does hurt our country in that our exports can't be sent out. We can't sell as much overseas that we make here as much. We're not going to sell as much because people can't afford it. So, but what it does do is it brings up the value of imports. Imports increase into this country. So, you can get things today much cheaper than you could have 2 months ago, 3 months ago, overseas materials. So I think one of the reasons that there's been a car shortage is this semiconductor parts pieces that come from the Far East, especially China. Now today we can get those things quickly and we can get them much cheaper. And so it's driving down the value of the cars. This helps drop our inflation. When we can bring in imports cheaper, it's cheaper to import than it is to do in this country. But what that in turn does, let me give you an example of this. You guys know I'm in the farming business too. Several years ago, we would sell a pound of almonds for $3. That was the farmer's price. And that would cost 1.5 euros. That's the symbol for euros right there. So we're selling it a lot in Spain and France and Germany. They use a lot of almonds and they can only be grown here in California. So we were getting $3 a pound and they would only have to pay $1.50 or 1.5 euros. Today in 2022, for that same 1.5 euros, we're only getting $1.50. We're only getting $1.50 a pound for the same product that's costing us more to grow. And the euros, they're putting out the same dollar, 1.5 euros, but our yield is cut in half. So this is why exports in this country tend to crash during these types of periods of time when the dollar goes strong and the Fed raises the interest rates. So industries that are dependent on foreign exports in the US, one of the biggest ones, if not the biggest, is agriculture. We ship food all over the world because we grow enough food for more than our 335 million people. We grow enough to feed 2/3 of the rest of the world. But the rest of the world today can't afford these things because we can't afford to ship them and get paid what we need to pay to cover the cost to produce them. So sidebar, that's a bad thing for humanity as a whole, but it is how economics work. So what happens is investment in the US skyrockets. So you're seeing right now a lot of this money that's coming in from these foreign countries, especially a lot from China, buying up US assets. Why? Because it's safer and it's a higher yield than it was not that long ago. So if you were a Chinese and you wanted to protect your money and your country was having a run on its bank, you'd be better off putting it in the US and getting 3-4% interest because it's safe than you would be losing 20 or 30% keeping it in the local currency. And that is exactly what happens. So investment in the US spikes as a result of this. On the downside is US employment goes down as a result of this because more stuff's coming in and we're producing less in this country because we can't ship it and people can't afford to buy it. So at some point, it's that point of perfect salination between freshwater and saltwater where everything's perfectly buoyant and we end up with inflation just right. And that's where we're heading by doing all this stuff. But that's the stuff that happens between inflation starting off too high and getting just right. Typically, these things can take years. In the late 70s, this thing actually started probably in 79. It went up to maybe 86 to 88. It took that long, whatever it is, 7, 8, 9 years to repair itself. We've seen these things happen in a year's time. I think this one's going to be quicker rather than longer, but I don't know it's going to happen all within the year. I think it could if it's done right, but I'm not sure that it's going to be done correctly. So there's going to be a lot of pain both here and in overseas. And a lot of times we just focus on what's going on here, but we have to keep in mind what happens in other parts of the world. So as investments from other countries flow into this country to buy houses, to buy rentals, to just put their money into banks, it makes it better for our industry. In the housing business, we tend to go up as a result of this. In other words, there's more profitability as a result of the fact that there's more money, more assets coming in, a lot of it geared towards the US housing market. So Used to be the government would trade these things, trade farm profitability for manufacturing profitability, all that. Today, their baby is the housing industry. We are like the protected species out there. So they're doing what they can to not kill off the patient with the improper dose of medicine. We got the right medicine, they're just not sure of the dose. And unfortunately, they're trying it on us to see if they give us too much, we die. Sorry, we'll take care of your little brother or sister, but you're gone. And that's what they're trying to do right now, is to find that right point to make the housing industry not like agriculture and some of the other industries that they've already thrown under the bus out there as a result of this pumping interest rates up. So we'll see. What happens when they do this, they put themselves in a box, our government, our Fed, is they're left with less tools in their toolbox which to repair any additional damage they cause. So usually at the end of the day, the best thing they can do is just print more money. You know, it's called quantitative easing. It's a nice, pretty term, but it just means crank up the printing press, print more money. So we'll see how this thing goes. But we're definitely in all of these spaces right now. Unemployment's starting to creep up. Imports are coming in crazy. Exports have stopped. Dollars up, other currencies down. All of this stuff's happening. Is going to lead down to this black line here at the bottom, where inflation will moderate and it'll be okay. So we're the last to the party in terms of pain. Other countries have had this inflation pain and now more inflation. Also, when we raise these rates and other currencies drop, that causes more inflation for them. So you guys probably all remember the lessons, you know, that you learned in school, or if you like to watch a history channel, there was a period of time in Germany's history between the First and Second World War, where it would take a barrel full of Deutsche marks, Reich marks, to afford a loaf of bread. And that's where inflation got to be hyperinflation. Same time it happened in this country in the 30s. So we could see stuff like that happen again. I don't think so anymore. The technology is too good. It's in the hands of too many people and it's spread out too globally. But we're going to be the last to get the pain, and we're going to be the first to come out of it. So yay, US. You know, we're on the right side of this the shovel on that deal. And just, you know, hang on. It's going to be a bumpy ride for the next few months at least. Keep in mind, the housing industry is the protected industry, in my opinion. This is the thing the government's trying to protect. We're going to be in good shape. You're going to have to be more creative to weather the storm. But there's a lot of ways to skin that cat. So let's commence a cat skinning out there. Okay. All right. That's it for news you can use for today.